Are you really judging a man by the sound of his dog tags hitting the floor? The judge scoffed under his breath, pressed by his own certainty as the faint flag rope click outside cut through the quiet lobby. Still, when the metal glimmered in Ray's palm, it lifted the whole room with a hush so deep you could hear your own heartbeat waiting in the doorway. And anyway, quiet men leave echoes too. Let me take you back. The morning light over Maple Ridge Post Office came in soft and pale, the kind of December glow that made the brick sidewalk look warmer than it really was. Folks were already lined up for holiday shipping, mugs of gas station coffee in their hands, scarves loose around their necks. A quiet hum filled the lobby, tape ripping packages thumping the radio behind the counter, crooning old Christmas standards. Ray Collins stepped off the curb with that steady, unhurried manner of his. He lifted a small parcel from the arms of young Emily Shaw before it tipped from her grip. "Careful there," he said, voice low like gravel smoothed by years. "That box looks about ready to jump." Emily laughed under her breath. "Guess I didn't see the step." But as Ray shifted the package, something slipped from inside his flannel collar. A pair of dog tags slid loose and hit the tile with a thin metallic clink that seemed to pause the whole row of customers for half a heartbeat. Judge Whitford, standing 2 people back, raised his head. His winter coat hung open, scarf tucked with courtroom precision. He stared at the tags as if they'd rolled onto sacred ground. "Those Navy tags," the judge said, voice carrying farther than he meant. "They real, Mr. Collins." Ray crouched to pick them up, thumb brushing the worn edges. "Just old memories, sir." The judge folded his arms. "Some folks wear things like that for attention." Emily's smile faded. A couple of people behind her shifted their weight the way folks do when they sense a chill that isn't from the weather. Before Ray could answer, the post office manager stepped out from behind the counter, clipboard pressed tight to his chest. "Holiday rush today, Ray," he said. "Rules are rules. Don't get slammed by them again." The word hung there, ritual correction more than scolding, the way management liked to remind everyone the season brought expectations as heavy as the mailbags. Ray nodded once. "Understood." Emily bent down slightly, hands tucked into her sleeves. "They look important," she whispered, eyes flicking to the tags resting in his palm. Ray eased them back under his collar. "Just something I hold on to. Nothing more." But Emily wasn't convinced. She watched him a moment longer, as if sensing there was something deeper beneath the quiet, something steadier than the line of customers or the judge's doubt. A hush settled around Ray as he straightened the lobby light, catching the faint etching on the metal letters worn from years of being carried close. He closed his hand around the tags, breathing out slow, the room's soft holiday murmur returning around him, like a tide rolling back in. The holiday rush had only grown by mid-morning, and the back room of Maple Ridge Post Office buzzed with the restless shuffle of packages stacked higher than the carts meant to carry them. Ray was setting aside a crate marked Community Coat Drive when the manager's voice cut across the room. "Ray, this donation box was missorted," he said, tapping the lid, as though it had personally offended him. "It was supposed to go to the outreach bin, not with outgoing parcels." Ray checked the label again, calm as ever. It was sitting by the wrong cart. "I just moved it where folks pointed." "That's not the system," the manager replied, shaking his head. "We can't afford mistakes. Not today." Out front, Judge Whitford lingered near the counter, speaking low to a young clerk who looked caught between politeness and discomfort. "He claims Navy service," the judge said, tilting his head toward the back room. "But those tags, I don't know, doesn't sit right." The clerk murmured something Ray couldn't catch, but he saw the doubt settle in her posture. Seen, but not spoken, an old familiar weight. When Ray returned to the lobby with the donation crate corrected, the manager intercepted him again. This time he held something between two fingers, the faint glimmer of metal dangling from a chain. "These dropped from your locker," he said. "You should keep better track." Ray reached for them, but the manager rolled the tags once across his palm. "They sell these online, you know, costume ones. Folks like the look." His tone aimed for casual, but landed closer to suspicion. Ray kept his voice even. "They're mine." The manager finally handed them over. "Well, just saying. Hard to tell these days." A couple of people in line glanced over. One man leaned toward the woman beside him. "He wears them like he wants attention," he whispered too loud to stay private. The words slipped through the room like a draft of cold air. Emily, sorting envelopes at the side table, looked up sharply, her brows pinched. Ray just tucked the tags into his shirt pocket, the metal warm against his palm from being held too long. Judge Whitford stepped toward the counter pen already uncapped. "Give me the community hall summons forms," he told the clerk. "I'd like Mr. Collins to appear this afternoon. Some questions need clearing up." The clerk slid over a single sheet. The judge signed with a crisp, deliberate stroke, the kind that echoed a gavel even without the sound. When Ray walked by moments later, the clerk lifted the document toward him with a hesitant hand. "Judge Whitford wants you at the community hall at 3, she said. He said it's routine." Ray accepted the paper quietly. "Routine," he echoed, though the word carried more corners than comfort. The lobby felt smaller suddenly, the chatter thinning into pockets of uneasy quiet. Emily gave him a small nod from across the room, as if trying to anchor him to something steadier than the judge's doubt. Ray slipped the tags deeper into his pocket and closed his fingers around them, letting the familiar shape press against his palm. The morning light slanted through the front windows, catching the dust in the air, and he stood there a moment longer before returning to the mail carts, carrying the summons in one hand and the weight of misunderstanding in the other. The VFW Hall sat just off Main Street, a weathered brick building with a flag that snapped lightly in the winter breeze. Inside, the place smelled of old coffee pine cleaner and stories no one ever fully told. Ray arrived with his sleeves rolled up, taking in the folding chairs stacked unevenly near the stage and the tangled cords running across the floor. Preparations for veterans. Eve always brought people together, though most folks didn't notice who made the place ready. He set his coat aside and moved toward the flag hanging a touch too low. As he reached up to straighten it, the edge of his shirt shifted and a sliver of metal flashed from his pocket. Mr. Briggs, the old Marine who oversaw the hall, paused mid-step. "That's an old Navy cut," he said quietly, nodding toward the tags peeking out. "Real ones, too." Ray tucked them deeper into his pocket. "Just keeping them safe." Briggs studied him for a long second, the lines around his eyes softening rather than sharpening. "You don't have to explain anything to me, son." Ray offered a small nod and moved on, but the weight of the moment lingered like a steady hand on his shoulder. He spent the next hour fixing what needed fixing. He rehung the flag so it stood crisp and true. He tightened the loose speaker cable that had caused last year's feedback squeal. He wiped down tables and aligned chairs so the rows looked welcoming instead of weary. Every task done without fuss, without claim, just quiet service, the kind that filled a room without anyone seeing it happen. Emily arrived with a box of printed programs. She stopped in the doorway when she spotted Ray on a ladder. "You're doing all this alone?" she asked. Ray climbed down slowly. "Just lending a hand. Hall's been good to a lot of folks." Emily watched him straighten the chairs with a precision she'd never seen at the post office. It was something steadier, almost ritual. "People don't always see what you do," she said softly. Ray offered a half smile. That's all right. Across the room, Briggs stepped into the off office and closed the door behind him. His voice carried just enough through the thin walls. Commander Reyes, sir. You might want to walk in tomorrow. Yeah, it's Ray Collins. There was a pause. Yes, sir. I think it's time. When Briggs emerged again, he didn't say anything, just nodded as if confirming something to himself. Ray stood alone in the center of the hall as late afternoon light settled in through the high windows. Shadows stretched long across the floorboards, and dust hung in the air like soft memory. He looked around at the empty chairs, the raised flag, the polished plaques on the wall. Work finished, work unnoticed. The quiet of the room pressed gently around him, as if the hall itself knew more than it said. The Veterans' Eve crowd packed the Maple Ridge Hall shoulder to shoulder, winter coats draped over chairbacks, the low hum of conversation rolling beneath the overhead lights. The flag Ray had rehung earlier stood bright against the stage, its colors catching the glow. Judge Whitford positioned himself near the microphone, gripping the podium with the same stiff certainty he carried everywhere. His eyes swept the room, settling now and then on Ray with that lingering thread of doubt he never quite hid. A sudden shift in the room's air broke the noise. People turned. A quiet ripple moved from the doorway inward. A hush fell as retired SEAL Commander Nathan Reyes walked in his boots soft on the wooden floor. He carried himself with the calm weight of someone who had spent a lifetime standing where noise and silence meant equal things. Ray was near the donation table helping straighten a row of gift envelopes. A small cardboard box slipped from a child's hands nearby, scattering its contents across the floor. Ray bent down to gather them, and in the motion the chain slipped again. His dog tags slid free, striking the floor with that familiar metallic tap. The overhead lights caught them at just the right angle, making the stamped navy lettering shimmer, as if it had waited years for someone to see it clearly. Commander Reyes stopped mid-stride, his gaze fixed on the tags, sharp but not unkind. "Where'd you serve, sailor?" he asked, voice cutting through the hall without raising volume. Ray straightened slowly, the tags resting in his palm. "Aboard Roosevelt. Long time ago." The commander drew in a breath, shoulders steadying. Then, with a precision that silenced even the restless children in the back, he raised his hand in a slow, deliberate salute. The room's entire center of gravity shifted toward that single motion. For a heartbeat, nothing else existed. People froze. Emily gripped her mother's hand, her eyes wide with a kind of dawning understanding. The judge's face drained of color as he watched a truth he'd doubted unfold right in front of him. For a moment it felt like every rule in that hall pinned Ray in place as the commander stepped forward, not with force but with the solemn weight of recognition. Reyes lowered his hand just enough to speak. "Those aren't replicas," he said, nodding toward the tags. "Those Navy tags belong to a man who kept engines alive over cold water. I know the type. I served beside them." The hall breathed as one soft, stunned, humbled. Ray held the tags close, not lifting his head fully, just enough to show the quiet acknowledgement in his eyes. The commander stood before him, still and sure, a silent bridge between past and present. And for several long seconds, the entire room stayed suspended in that single image, a salute, given, a truth revealed, and a man who'd never asked for recognition finally seen. Judge Whitford stepped away from the podium, as if the floor beneath him had shifted. The noise of the hall returned in low, uncertain waves, but he moved through it slowly, eyes fixed on Ray. When he reached him, the judge removed his glasses and held them like an apology he didn't quite know how to deliver. "Mr. Collins," his voice thinned, "I doubted you. I truly did." Ray adjusted the donation box he was still holding. "It's all right, sir. Happens." The judge shook his head. It shouldn't. Not like that. Ray offered a small nod, enough to show he heard, not enough to make the man feel absolved. And somehow that gentleness, that steady acceptance, softened the judge more than any sharp reply would have. People began to gather, forming an unspoken line the way crowds do when conscience pulls them in the same direction. A woman from Maple Street came forward first. "Thank you, Ray," she said, brushing his sleeve, "for all you do here." Then a man Ray recognized from the hardware store. "Didn't know you served. Wish I had." A teenager handed Ray a folded program from the event. "My granddad was Navy. He'd have liked you." The line grew. Neighbors, customers from the post office, folks who'd seen Ray every day but never truly looked. Their voices layered softly like a warm quilt pulled up on a cold night. From the back of the hall, the faint hum of a choir rehearsal drifted forward, tenor notes rising through the air like dust caught in sunlight. Behind them, the fellowship room lights flickered on as volunteers began setting out paper cups and carafes of fresh coffee. Someone called out, "Refill over here," and laughter followed, the tired but cheerful kind that made the place feel lived in. Outside the side doors, porch swings along Maple Ridge Lane creaked in the evening chill, moving just enough to show the breeze had picked up. It carried the smell of pine from the churchyard and something sweet from the cafe down the street. Near the community board, somebody had pinned up a new paper square in bold handwriting. "Be kind. Folks carry unseen stories." Emily stood beneath it, holding her phone. She'd taken a picture earlier, the moment the commander saluted Ray, and now she gently taped a printed copy beside the sign. Beneath it, she added a small caption in soft blue ink, "Veterans We Honor." Then with careful hands, she placed a sketch she'd made, Ray's dog tags rendered in pencil, with the chain looping like a quiet signature. Ray lingered near the back of the hall, hands in his pockets, letting the hum of voices fill the space around him. He didn't step forward. He didn't correct anything or explain himself. He simply watched as Emily pinned the picture, her arms stretching high to make sure it sat straight and true. The lights dimmed slightly as someone prepared the stage for the evening portion of the event, casting a soft glow over the board where the dog tags now hung. People kept moving, talking, filling the hall with warmth that hadn't been there a few hours earlier. Ray stood still, a quiet silhouette against the glow, taking it all in without a word, steady, humble, as if the moment belonged to the town more than to him. A week later, the holiday rush had eased, leaving Maple Ridge Post Office quieter, almost thoughtful in its stillness. On the front wall, right beside the framed postal regulations and the faded photo of the building's groundbreaking, a new wooden frame hung in polished maple. "Ray Collins, quiet service, steady hands." Inside the frame rested a photograph of Ray helping a child sort packages, the dog tags visible just enough to glint like a signature. Below it, someone had added a small navy blue ribbon. Customers paused when they walked in, reading the plaque, with the kind of respect that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Ray was sorting mail near the counter when Judge Whitford entered, hat held respectfully under his arm. He walked slower than usual, as though stepping into a place that required gentler footsteps. When he reached the frame, he looked at it for a long moment, then turned toward Ray. "I doubted you once, Mr. Collins," he said, voice steady. "Not anymore." The words settled into the room like warm air rising through floor vents. Ray nodded, neither humble nor proud, simply taking the sentiment for what it was, letting the weight of it fall where it should. Emily stepped in just behind the judge, carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. She paused when she saw the plaque, her eyes widening just a little. "Folks say that Commander's salute still echoes in this town," she said, the words soft but certain as she looked from the frame to Ray. Ray closed a mailbag and wiped his hands on his jeans. Maybe it does, he murmured. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small navy coin, its edges worn smooth from time and miles. He held it out to her. Carry it forward, kiddo. Emily hesitated only a second before taking it, her fingers closing around the coin with the kind of care that understood the gesture. I will, she said. Outside on Maple Ridge Lane, a porch swing moved with the easy push of the winter wind. A small flag by the entryway of the post office fluttered, catching the afternoon light just right. Through the front window, the framed dog tags on the wall shimmered faintly as the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow that touched the counter, the mail slots, and the quiet man who had never asked to be seen. Ray stood near the doorway, watching the town move along, neighbors carrying packages, kids chasing each other past the benches, life continuing in its steady, familiar rhythm. He breathed in the cool air, letting it settle into him the way old memories do when they finally find a place to rest. And with the soft creak of the porch swing drifting down the street, the last light of day glinted off the framed tags one more time, carrying their story forward. If this story moved you, share it forward.